Good morning, Mr. Woods.
Good morning.
Can you explain to me your childhood?
Yes, I grew up in a family with a much older brother and sister, my grandmother, my mother, and our adopted father. We grew up very poor. Neither of my parents has an education. My father was illiterate until he was in his 60s. My mother never got past fourth or fifth grade. My brother and sister were D and C students. I myself, I did well in school. When I was 6 years old, they gave me an encyclopedia, and I sat and literally read the encyclopedia from one end to the other, and that's how I educated myself to prepare for school. My parents really couldn't help me with school at home. There was no expectation of college. It was get a high school diploma and go to work and move out of the house and, start your own life. I think I mentioned that we were poor. My parents refused to ever take welfare, but often we didn't have enough food to eat, and people in the church would sometimes leave groceries on our doorstep. So that gives you an idea that kind of, we grew up in the city. Close to Liberty City. When I was about 6 or 7 years old, we moved to Hialeah, and it was like a whole new environment for us. So that's my background. Oh, and let me say about my education, I was the first person in my family to go to college. And I have a master's degree, and I became a media specialist in Dade County Schools. I've been working in Dade County Schools 25 years, Carroll City for 15 years.
Well, first, congratulations. And I could kind of relate to your story a little bit because my mom wasn't the wealthiest mom, and I grew up in the city until I moved to Miami Gardens, and she accepted like food stamps.
Yes.
And during the church, they have this room where they get pass out groceries, breads, and etc. So yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Have you ever experienced racism?
Yes, and I've seen racism. I know what racism looks like. I'll start by saying I come from a racist family. Now, we went to church, like I said, we went to a Pentecostal church. We went to church very much, about 4 days a week. When we would drive through what they call a bad neighborhood, as soon as we would start driving through a neighborhood where you saw black people, my mother would say, okay, everybody lock your doors. And that's how I grew up. The word nigger was very common in my family, and not in a good way, right? Although we went to church with black people, and I would question this. None of it made sense to me, because if we go to church with black people, then how can all black people be bad? My mother would say, well, some black people are good, like the ones we go to church with, but most of them are bad. So that's how I grew up. My brother went to when we moved to Hialeah High School, to Hialeah, I attended Hialeah High School. My brother went to Hialeah Middle School, used to be Hialeah Junior High. Around 1966, that's when they started integration. So the first two black boys who came to Hialeah Middle School, my brother personally beat him up at PE because he felt like it was his duty to keep the school white. That how dare black people, come into my school. So that's the background I grew up with. But yet I always questioned it. I said, why? What's wrong with integration? What's wrong with people getting along together? And especially since we go to church and we talk about it, brotherly love and how everybody's, supposed to be kind and all this, and we're supposed to be like Jesus. And yet we hate black people. And then after we moved to Hialeah, my mother hated Cubans. And she would always say, those stupid Cubans, they're taken away. Now, my mother would not go on welfare, but she would blame Cubans for all going on welfare and taking money away from other people. So I experienced racism from the point of view of being on the side of the racist. Okay, I never personally felt like anybody was treated me worse because of the way I looked. Quite the opposite. I found that people treated me better. I'll tell you another thing that you may not have thought of. Height. We discriminate against people based on height. If somebody's tall, people would say to me, "Oh, what a fine, tall young man you are," right? Whereas other people who are short, and I didn't really realize this until I married a woman who was kind of short, and she told me about how her whole school life was hell because everybody was always teasing her for being short. And they always said, she was worth less because she was short. So that was an eye-opener for me later in life. I said, wow, people discriminate against various things. So I kind of got off track with the question, but I'll let you continue.
The height thing is new to me. I never really heard that, and they never taught that. But being, experiencing the racism and stuff, how did that make you feel?
Well, it made me feel sad because I try to look for the good in people rather than looking at what they look like. And I'll give you another example. Because I grew up in the 60s, and, we looked up to Bob Marley. Bob Marley, Jamaica, the whole reggae thing. It was awesome to us. And then I came to schools in Miami as a teacher, and I started hearing, oh, watch out for him. He's got dreadlocks. He's a bad guy. And I said, wait a minute. I associate dreadlocks with Bob Marley, love and peace, but somehow other people associate dreadlocks with criminals. So I thought that was interesting. So I don't discriminate against people. I try not to discriminate against people based on what they look like, because I've seen people who look terrible. Sometimes they're poor. Sometimes they can't afford to take a bath or, to make themselves look nice. But you start talking to them and you realize they have some real, good qualities. They're good people. Maybe they just need a little help to get along. And that, to me, that's what education's for. And that's why I became an educator. I did not go to college till I was 28 years old, till I was, close to 30. I had worked a bunch of dead-end jobs, and I said, you know what, this isn't working. I know that if I want to be a teacher, and I wanted to go back and be a teacher because I always found schools to be a safe place for me. Okay. Right? Mm-hmm. So I said, I'm going to go back and teach in that environment that I remember, because my family was very chaotic. They used to fight, they used to yell at each other, and I was always a quiet kid, and I would go kind of hide in the corner while they yelled at each other and got angry at each other. So they had anger management problems. So in all of this, I started working in Dade County schools. And I just happened to start working at Vannie Blanton Elementary, which is 103rd Street and 7th Avenue, if you're not familiar with it. Mostly Haitian kids. And people would say, oh, look at those dirty Haitians. And it's like American black students were putting down the Haitians. It's like everybody tries to find somebody who's beneath them so they can point to those people and say, they're the bad people, and I'm better than them. I may not be as good as those people, but at least I'm better than these people. So people are always judging each other and trying to fit their place. And I think they do it for two. They either do it because they're insecure, and they want to feel better about themselves, and they do it by putting other people down, or they feel like they're better than everybody else, and so they put people down.
I experienced that because I'm not Haitian, but when I went to elementary, it was Tucson Elementary, and it's in the city.
Yes.
They call us American Yanks, and they would call us Yanks, and
yes,
the Americans would call them saying, "Oh, you eat cats, you're Haitian,
exactly.
You're dirty."
Exactly. It goes both ways, doesn't it?
Yeah. Have you ever experienced sexism in life?
I have probably been a sexist in life because the culture, when I was a kid, we could call people sissy. If a boy wasn't tough, you could say he was a sissy. We used to use slurs like gay, you're queer, you're a homo, right? Now I know that those things, that doesn't matter to me. In fact, I believe everybody should be equal no matter, sexual orientation, whether you're male or female, whatever. I think everybody should be judged on who they are, how they act, not what they look like or what they do in their personal life. So let's start with that. So, but it was always acceptable to say that women can't do this and women can't do that. They used to say, oh, a woman could never be president because what happens when she gets her period? She won't be able to run the country, right? These were all myths that we participated in. So, you know, in that case, that was me being immature and being sexist. As far as nobody's ever, you know, I've never been put down for being a male. But that's because, again, I've got the privilege. I've got the privilege of being male, privilege of being tall, privilege of being the color that I am. And people do tend to sort people into colors, you know, even dark-colored people. And by the way, do I look white to you?
Oh.
Right? We call them white people, but people aren't white. People can be very light. They can be darker skinned. They can have a tan. You know, I'm kind of pink or peach colored. But, you know, you've got also people of color who say, and we're not even getting into Mexicans or Cubans or, you know, Hispanics and all that. But, okay, they're really black, so I'm better than them because I'm yellow, you know, or red, you know. That's a red nigger over there, you know. And I don't use that as an offensive word. I use it because I hear it every day in the hallways in this school. And it bothers me when I hear it still. And I understand that people who use it don't use it as an insult. They're just using it as a term. But the term is so charged with me that it's hard for me to even say it, right? And I can tell you, my brother said to me, well, you work in a school with black people, he said, and I bet they call each other nigger. And I said, yes, they do. He said, but you could never use the word nigger. I said, well, that's not true, because I can, and nobody bats an eye. So, you know, that's for what it's worth. I'm not saying that it's a bad word or a good word. Sometimes you take a word that's bad and you turn it around and you use it to give yourself power. So I say more power to people who you know, use it appropriately. If you're putting each other down, I think it's a bad word. Okay. We'll continue.
I don't know, but it feels like you're very serious about this word.
Yes.
Because I could feel the emotion.
Oh yes, yes, yeah. Well, that and the word fuck, I'm sorry to say. Because I hear those two words, nigger and fuck, all day long. And sometimes I'll say to my class, I'll use those words to kind of diffuse and to say, think about what you say. You know, we become, you know, and I don't use the word nigger at home, but I use the F word at home. But I know when it's appropriate to use that word and when it's not to. And in school or in church, it's really not appropriate. So I think I say to students, I say, please stop using profanity. What? I didn't use any. They don't even realize they're using it.
Yeah, it's so common.
It's so common, yes. But go ahead. We're getting off topic.
It's fine. Do you believe there's a beauty standard in life?
Absolutely. Absolutely there is. And I don't know how you solve that other than to be more aware that people have feelings. All people have feelings. All people, you know, there is an ideal of beauty. If you look at models on TV, that's changing now. You know, you never saw a larger woman portrayed on television. Now those walls are breaking down. Now advertisements, it's like they pretend like all women wear skinny clothes. Yeah. Where, truthfully, probably the majority of women are not skinny or obese. They're somewhere in the middle. And I think we should recognize the beauty in every person. That's something I also feel passionate about, because sometimes we especially when we're looking for partners, you know, we're looking for someone to date, it's like men want a beautiful woman, and women, the stereotype is men want a beautiful woman, a woman wants a wealthy man, right? Yeah. So I think we got to get away from these stereotypes. To me, it's more important to find somebody who shares your values, who shares. I know in my own life the best relationship I've had is with someone who I can relate to and talk to, rather than somebody who's beautiful, but we sit together and we got nothing to say to each other. So yes, there is a beauty standard, and it's unfortunate that, again, we rank people. This person's, Beyonce's gorgeous, she's at the top, right? And who was that movie, Precious?
Oh yes, Precious.
Right? So she could be held as a standard of somebody who's, toward the bottom. And it's like you've got all these people in between, and people, again, if I want to feel better about myself, I say, oh, you're ugly, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just silly. Everybody has something about us that we're not perfect. Okay?
So from my understanding, your definition of beauty is basically within. And
within, more within than without. It's a combination. You've got to be, and again, I'm talking about in relationships. You've got to be with somebody who you feel comfortable with in all ways. So does looks have something to do with that? Yes. I have to say yes. We all discriminate a little bit. I think the best we can do is not outwardly discriminate. And definitely not, if I'm a boss at a workplace, I should not base that decision on beauty. I should look at who's best for the company rather than somebody that I want to look at all day. Yeah. And that happens too. I believe that's a problem in our society.
Okay. If like in the story The Bluest Eye, Piccola was raped by her father and had a baby. Mm-hmm. But I think the baby later on deceased. Now she feels as if she's ugly because she lost her innocence and believes if she get a pair of new blue eyes, she'll be more beautiful.
Because I'm not familiar with the book. Yeah. I've heard of it, and lots of English teachers have used it here. I did not know that. I believe that's I believe, incest and in many families, that's a problem. I think we need to help people who've had that experience and take the stigma. You know what I mean by stigma?
Not really.
Stigma is when we say something is bad and therefore we shouldn't talk about it, right? Yeah. So a stigma is something happened to you and everybody whispers about it. It's like, oh, she got raped by her father. Right? We talk about people behind their back. Yeah. Rather than just giving those people support and trying to help them move forward. They've got enough problems of their own, and I think we need more help in communities. Of course, you can get help through the church. You can get, you can go to a therapist or that sort of thing to deal with that. But that is a problem. In that story, she's looking for something that she can't get back. So you've got, to me, the first step is you've got to heal yourself. You've got to admit, you've got to say to yourself, it's not my fault. When people are abused as children, it's not their fault, right? It's because somebody older took advantage of them. So we've got to, show compassion for them and say to them, look, this was not your fault. Therefore, don't try not to feel guilty about it, right? It's not anything you did. It's something that somebody did to you. So, and then she had the child and lost the child, and she's thinking, I'm assuming if she had another child with blue eyes, is that what the story?
No, she didn't end up with a child. Actually, she experienced her menstrual, and she was shocked by it. She thought she was going to die.
Yes.
Like God is punishing her because of the baby.
Yes.
Yeah, but she didn't end up with another child.
Oh, okay. But she's still seeking blue eyes.
Yes.
And that's the problem. It's, we got to be happy with what we've got and what we and doing the best we can do. And let go of the past, let go of negativity, and always move forward and be positive. That's my personal philosophy, and that's why I've worked in schools like this for so many years. Because I know that I can't help every kid that's here, but I'm going to get through to a few kids, and if I can help a few kids, then I've done something good with my life. Yeah?
I feel as if some, like when they get raped, they like keep it bottled up.
Right.
I feel like they should express themselves.
Yes.
because once you keep the emotions bottled up, it ends
Yes.
up to worse things.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
Well, you see what's happening now is that all these men, because for centuries, men, white, in particular, white men have been in charge. They feel like they can do anything. They feel like they can take advantage of any woman. And it's still going on now, except now we're starting to point at these men and say, you need to pay a price for that. And that's Harvey Weinstein, you know, he's never going to have a career. Bill Cosby, to some extent. Depending on, you got to be, you know, people make up their own mind about whether they believe in these things. In the end, it usually is proven by a court. So I'm glad to see the Me Too movement. I'm glad to see women being empowered. I'm glad to see women running for office, because that's part of the problem is you've got all these men who are making laws that affect women, and women don't have any say over it. So now women are running for office in record numbers. And I won't even talk about the current president. We won't even get into that. But I believe we're moving backwards as far as racism goes. I thought when Obama was elected president that things had really changed and they would stay changed. But you can see that racist people are trying to pull back and say, nope, everything Obama did was bad, and now we've got a guy who's going to look out for us. Us meaning white people.
Yes. Okay. Lastly, my question is, in the story, Mrs. Breedlove and Charlie Breedlove, Charlie abuses his wife because as a child, he lost his manhood. He feels that because he got caught having sex with a country girl, and two men caught him. And, you know, back then it was racism, so they was like, why were you doing that?
Right.
And so they stayed, recorded him, and watched him have sex with the girl. So he felt, what's the word? Well, he felt like he lost his manhood. So he abuses his wife to release anger, and his wife abuses him because she felt like it's a God's duty. Do you have any advice for people who goes through abuse?
Yes. I mean, that's a difficult question, but I think you need to look for help. And again, whether it's through a church, I keep saying church because usually a church is an open place that's going to try to help you no matter what. Otherwise, if you're going to go to a therapist, you've got to pay, and if you can't afford a therapist, then sometimes you can get assistance with that. But to me, the best therapy you can get is from either friends, family, or church. And I think, yes, people have to recognize that they have problems, and they get caught in what we call feedback loops where they fight all the time. And this is what I grew up in my family. You know, rather than saying, okay, we have a disagreement, let's talk about it. If we have to agree not to agree, then we do. But at the end of the day, if you're a husband and wife, you should say, we love each other enough to work things out and not to fight. Or if you can't live together without fighting, then get a divorce and go find somebody else. Unless you're just an angry person. But I think people need to recognize anger that's not based on, you get angry because somebody did something bad to you. That's different, right? I get angry over little things, but I resolve it, through peaceful means. Anytime that people want to, be physically violent toward each other, I think that is it's like an illness. And I think you got to treat it like that, and those people need to get help. Unfortunately, some never will. So that's the bottom line. But it is, what's the word? I can't think. It's like a disease. Yeah, it's like they need help. They're broken. Those people are broken. They need to get fixed. Whether they will ever fix themselves, some people never mature in their life. Some people mature when they're young, some in middle age, some people never mature. I'm over 60 now, so I feel like I have gradually matured, but I think I finally have a good handle on how life works, and you're just wasting your time if you're being hurtful to other people. Hurting other people hurts yourself.
I agree.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.